There was a time when I couldn't look at myself in the mirror for more than a few seconds. Not because of a scar, not because of a pimple, but because I didn't like the person staring back at me. It's strange, isn't it? You can live with yourself every day, wake up with the same face, carry the same body, think the same thoughts, and still feel like a stranger when you look in the mirror. Worse than a stranger, someone you silently judge, someone you secretly despise. I didn't tell anyone. Because how do you explain something like that? How do you say, I don't like who I am, without sounding broken? So I laughed louder, in groups, smiled wider in photos, posted just enough to look okay. And then I went home, washed my face, and avoided my own reflection, like it was a crime scene something I had to clean up, but couldn't bear to witness. I think the worst part wasn't what I saw. It was what I felt, like I was always falling short of some invisible version of myself, a version who spoke confidently, a version who didn't compare her every flaw to strangers on the internet, a version who didn't replay old conversations at 2 a.m., whispering, "You sounded so stupid." Every mirror became a silent judge, not because of my appearance, but because of my disappointment in who I was becoming. I remember one evening in particular. It had been a normal day work, coffee, pretend to listen kind of conversations. But when I got home and stood in front of the mirror, something broke. I looked at myself and said, out loud, "Why aren't I like you?" No one else heard it, just me. And it echoed in that tiny room like thunder in a church. I didn't cry. Not then. Just stared at the tired eyes, the fake smile, the heaviness I carried but didn't name. I didn't want to admit it back then. But I wasn't living, I was performing. Every day felt like an audition. For love, for respect, for enoughness. Kept waiting for someone to say, "You're good, you can rest now." But no one ever did, because I hadn't said it to myself first. And here's the secret I wish someone had told me. Self-hate doesn't disappear when you get more likes. It doesn't dissolve when someone falls in love with you. It doesn't vanish when you buy the right clothes or speak the right way. Because the wound isn't on the surface, it's underneath. In the small moments, in the childhood echoes, in the quiet space between who you are and who you think you should be. This book doesn't start with healing. It starts with hiding. It starts in that moment when you stand in front of the mirror, eyes tired, soul aching, and realize, I don't want to feel like this anymore. That's where I began, not with a breakthrough, but with a whisper. There has to be more than this. And slowly, painfully, beautifully, I would begin the journey, not to become perfect, but to become someone I could finally look at and say, you know what? I like you. Not because the world told me to, not because I became extraordinary, but because I chose to see myself differently, because I stopped waiting for approval and started offering myself kindness. That's how it begins. Right there in front of a mirror you once feared, with a sigh, a second chance, and the tiniest seed of hope. Part 2. The Silent Critic Inside Me. It wasn't just the mirror. Even when I wasn't looking at my reflection, something inside me kept talking. A quiet voice, a constant voice, one that judged me before anyone else had the chance. That was a stupid thing to say. Look at everyone else, they're doing better. You'll never catch up. They're just being polite. No one actually likes you. It didn't shout, it whispered. But somehow, those whispers hit harder than any scream. I didn't realize, for the longest time, that I was carrying someone else's voice inside me. It wasn't born from truth. It was built one piece at a time. A teacher's disapproval, a parent's cold silence, a friend who suddenly pulled away, a cruel joke in middle school that everyone else forgot. But I didn't. Little by little, those moments shaped the voice in my head. And because I heard it so often, I began to believe it must be right. That voice followed me everywhere. Into the classroom where I never raised my hand. Into conversations where I laughed too quickly, too loudly, just to seem likable. Into relationships where I gave too much, too fast, because I thought I had to earn love. No matter how kind someone was to me, the voice would whisper, "Wait until they see the real you." And I lived in fear of being found out. But here's the part no one tells you. You can get used to that voice. You can live with it so long that it starts to sound like your own thoughts. You forget it was ever planted there by someone else. You forget to question it, and so I didn't. I just assumed I was the problem, that I was naturally insecure, that I was born broken, until one day I watched a child trip and fall at the park. She stood up, scraped her knee, and looked around not to cry, but to see if anyone had noticed. And her mother rushed over, not to scold her, not to say, "Be more careful," but to kneel down and whisper, "You're okay. That wasn't your fault." I don't know why, but something in me cracked wide open. Because I realized no one had ever said that to me. Every mistake I made was a reason to judge myself. Every weakness, a weapon I turned inward. And worst of all, I had learned to be the harshest person in my own life. That night, I sat with myself. No phone, no noise, just me. And that voice, I asked it quietly, "Whose voice are you?" And for the first time, it didn't answer. It didn't answer. Because maybe it wasn't mine to begin with. Maybe it was time to stop listening. Maybe it was time to speak back. Not with hate, not with shame, but with a new voice. A softer one. One that didn't say, "You failed again," but asked, "Are you okay?" That night didn't fix me, but it gave me something I hadn't felt in years. The power to interrupt the cycle, to question the cruelty, to say, even if just once, "Hey, that's not fair. I deserve better than this." And slowly I began to understand the way we speak to ourselves is not just a habit dot, it's a home we live in. I was finally ready to rebuild mine. Part 3. Unpacking the stories I believed. We don't just wake up one day and hate ourselves. It's not sudden. It's built layer by layer, story by story. Somewhere along the way, I collected stories about who I was. Not the kind in books. A kind that whispered through experiences and settled into my skin. Like the time a classmate called me too much. So I decided to be quieter. Smaller, like when someone I loved left without explanation. So I believed I was forgettable. Like when my efforts weren't noticed and I was told, "You could have done better." So I believed good was never good enough. Each moment wrote a sentence. Each silence filled in a blank. Until I had an entire book of lies about myself, and I memorized every word. I believed I was difficult. I believed I was annoying. I believed that if people really got to know me, they'd leave. No one sat me down and said, "This is who you are." But the world doesn't need to speak loudly to teach you how to shrink. It just needs to ignore your light enough times. And you'll start dimming it on your own. One day, I found an old journal from when I was 13. The handwriting was uneven, the ink smudged. But the pain was so familiar, it felt recent. It said, "Maybe if I disappear a little, they'll like me more." And I cried, not because I remembered writing it, but because I realized I had never stopped living that sentence. That's when I knew, to change how I saw myself, I had to go back and unpack the stories I had stored for too long. I started writing down the truths I believed. I ruin good things. I'm not fun to be around. People only stay if I prove I'm worth it. Then I asked, where did I learn this? Whose voice is this? Is this always true? Most of the time, the answer was no, it's not true. It never was. And even when part of it felt true, I realized it came from a version of me who was trying to survive, not a version of me who knew how to live. You see, healing isn't about blaming others for the stories. It's about rewriting. And it's standing in front of the mirror and saying, maybe I was never too much. Maybe they just weren't able to hold enough. It's whispering to that younger self, you didn't ruin anything. You just loved with everything you had. It's replacing, I'm hard to love, with, I'm learning to love myself, and that's enough for now. Unpacking the stories hurts, because it means facing the parts of your life you've tried to forget. But buried stories don't die. They become your voice, your shadow, your doubt. And I was tired of carrying a book I didn't write. So I began the slow, honest work of authorship, not to become perfect, but to become true. To become someone who no longer lived by stories that never belonged to me. Part 4. The moment I chose myself. It didn't happen on a birthday. It didn't happen after a breakup or in the middle of some big realization. It happened on a random Tuesday. I was tired, not just the kind of tired that sleep fixes, but the kind where even breathing feels like a quiet argument with yourself. I remember standing in the kitchen, staring at the sink full of dishes, and thinking, I can't do this anymore. But I wasn't talking about the dishes. I was talking about pretending to be okay all the time, about giving my best energy to everyone else and leaving none for myself, about staying silent just to keep the peace, even when it cost me my own. There was no dramatic moment, just a quiet decision. I didn't want to keep abandoning myself. I didn't want to keep choosing people who didn't choose me. I didn't want to keep proving I was worthy just to feel acceptable for a day. So I did something small. I canceled a plan I didn't want to attend. I turned off my phone without apologizing for needing space. I looked in the mirror and said, not loudly, not bravely, but clearly, you matter too. And I cried, not because I was sad, but because no one had ever said that to me. Not even me. That was the moment everything began to shift. Not the world, not other people, but the way I showed up for myself. It wasn't easy. Choosing yourself often feels wrong at first. It feels selfish, dramatic, like you're letting others down. But here's the truth I've learned. You can't keep abandoning yourself and expect to feel whole. You can't keep pouring love into others and never taste it yourself. You can't build a life where you are always the afterthought. That Tuesday, in a quiet kitchen, something changed. Not because life got better, but because I decided I deserved better. It started with a whisper, a small, brave choice to not betray myself again. And from that moment on, I wasn't perfect, but I was mine. Part 5. Learning to be gentle with myself. At first, I thought healing meant becoming stronger, tougher, unbothered. I thought it meant silencing the pain and proving I was above it. But that wasn't healing. That was avoidance with prettier clothes. True, healing felt softer, uncomfortable, but soft. It wasn't about pushing through. It was about slowing down. For years, I had treated myself like a project to fix. If I failed, I scolded myself. If I cried, I called myself weak. If I felt lost, I forced myself to pretend I had it together. But one day, I caught myself apologizing for crying alone. Apologizing to no one, as if being human was a mistake. And something in me asked, would you talk to a friend like this? Of course not. If a friend said, I'm tired, I feel behind, I don't like who I am, I'd hug them without asking why. Yet I never offered myself that same kindness. I demanded strength from wounds still bleeding. I expected answers from a heart still trying to find its voice. So I tried something new. The next time I made a mistake, I didn't yell inside. I just whispered, it's okay, you're learning. The next time I cried, I let the tears fall without rushing them. The next time I felt lost, I didn't force a direction. I just sat with myself and said, we'll figure it out. Being gentle didn't mean I stopped growing. It meant I grew without punishing myself along the way. I started keeping a list not of goals, but of moments I showed myself kindness. Like going to bed when I was exhausted, even if the work wasn't done. Like saying no, even when guilt tried to follow. Like holding my own hand in silence and realizing I felt safe with me. The world had taught me that kindness was for others. But I was learning it had to begin with me. I didn't become gentle overnight. Some days I still slipped back into old habits, old voices, old shame. But now, there's a part of me that knows how to speak back. A part that says, you're not too sensitive. You're just listening now. A part that no longer demands perfection, but presence. And in that presence, I began to feel something I hadn't felt in years. Not pride, not confidence, but something quieter, something warmer. I began to feel safe being me. Part 6. Changing what I see in the mirror. The mirror never really changed. Same size, same frame, same lighting. But something about the way I looked into it began to shift. I used to search for flaws without even realizing it. My eyes would immediately go to the parts I disliked most. Like my mind had been trained to spot imperfections first. But one morning I paused, not to criticize, not to fix my hair or adjust my posture, just to really look. And I saw something I hadn't seen before. Not beauty in the way magazines define it, but something softer, something honest. I saw tired eyes that had seen too much and survived. I saw a quiet strength in the way my shoulders no longer sagged in shame. I saw a softness in my face, less because I smiled, more because I had stopped frowning at myself. The mirror hadn't lied to me all those years, but it also hadn't told me the full truth, because I had only looked through a lens of judgment. And now I was learning to look with compassion. Some days it still felt foreign. There were mornings when the old thoughts returned. You look tired. You're falling behind. You're not enough. But instead of agreeing, I responded gently. Yes, I look tired because I've been trying. Yes, I feel behind, but I'm moving at my own pace. Yes, I'm not perfect, and I was never meant to be. And that changed everything. Because now, when I look in the mirror, I don't just see features. I see stories. I see progress. I see someone who's still becoming. And instead of judging the process, I honor it. There's a quiet kind of confidence that comes, not from thinking you're flawless, but from knowing you're real and liking that reality just as it is. I started writing small notes to myself, not affirmations to fix me, but reminders to see me. You're allowed to take up space today. You don't have to earn rest. You're doing better than you think. And each time I passed the mirror, it wasn't a test anymore. It was a moment of recognition, like meeting an old friend again, one I had ignored for far too long. The mirror hadn't changed, but I had, and now, finally, I could look and not flinch. I could look and maybe, just maybe, smile. Part 7. Becoming Someone I Like. It happened quietly without applause. There was no big moment, no spotlight, just a slow unfolding, like petals that no longer feared the sun. I realized one day that I didn't cringe at my reflection anymore. I didn't replay every conversation I had that day. I didn't apologize in my head for simply existing. I had stopped performing, stopped shrinking, stopped waiting for someone else to make me feel valid. I had become someone I could sit with in silence, someone I could trust when the world felt too loud, someone I could laugh with, not because everything was perfect, but because I wasn't pretending anymore. The journey hadn't made me flawless. It had made me honest. And honesty, it turns out, is where real peace begins. I stopped asking, am I enough for them? And started asking, am I enough for me? And for the first time, the answer felt like yes. Not because I did everything right, but because I had learned to stay, even when I didn't. Liking myself didn't mean I liked every part of my past. It meant I forgave myself for not knowing better then. It meant I was kind to the version of me who tried so hard just to survive. It meant I no longer needed to explain myself in rooms that didn't feel safe. I didn't have to be louder to be heard. I didn't have to be smarter to be worthy. I just had to be me fully, honestly, imperfectly. Now, when people leave, I don't question my worth. When plans fall through, I don't spiral. When someone doesn't understand me, I don't bend myself into shapes just to fit, because I've found something more valuable than approval. I've found peace in my own presence. That's what becoming someone I like really means. Not reaching a finish line, but learning to walk beside myself through every season, to say, I know you. I see you. I like you even now. And maybe that's the most beautiful kind of love. The kind you don't have to chase, because it already lives within you, waiting for you to notice it again. Part 8. A life built from self-respect. When you start liking yourself, your life begins to rearrange itself quietly. Not overnight, but choice by choice. You stop chasing people who make you feel small. You stop over-explaining your feelings just to be taken seriously. You stop walking into rooms that drain your light just to prove you can handle the dark. Instead, you begin to build a life where your peace isn't negotiable, where your voice isn't a last-minute guest, but a constant presence at your own table. I used to think self-respect meant being tough, but I've learned it means being clear. Clear about what you allow, clear about what you deserve, clear about what you are no longer available for. It means saying no, not out of anger, but out of alignment. It means walking away not to hurt someone, but to protect yourself. It means resting without guilt, loving without losing yourself, succeeding without sacrificing your sanity. When you respect yourself, you stop begging the world to do it for you. You stop settling for almosts maybes, and someday when they change, you stop accepting crumbs and calling it love. Because you've tasted something better, your own presence, your own kindness, your own courage to start over. And slowly, the people around you change too. Some fall away, those who only stayed when you stayed small. But others arrive, those who see your growth and say, "Me too." People who meet you where you are, not where they need you to be. A life built from self-respect doesn't look dramatic, it looks steady. Like boundaries, kept like early nights, like quiet mornings with coffee and peace. It looks like not needing to be chosen, because you already chose yourself. And in that life, you don't need to prove your worth anymore. You live it, you breathe it. You carry it in how you walk, how you speak to yourself, how you love. Because now you are no longer someone you tolerate. You are someone you trust, someone you believe in, someone you like. And that changes everything. Thank you for listening to Audiobook Healing. If you found this video helpful, please hit the like button to spread positivity to others.